The movie begins with a group of college students who decide to go on a snowboarding trip in the snow-covered mountains. The group consists of two couples, Jill and her boyfriend Derek, and Maddie with his girlfriend Bree. Joining them are their friends Todd, along with Philip and Allison, who are also part of the group. Bree is excitedly filming the trip, capturing all the fun moments with her camera. However, Allison isn't a fan of being recorded and quickly asks Bree to stop filming her. As they continue their journey, Jill notices that one of her friends isn't feeling well. A short while later, the group spots a police car parked in the middle of the road. The officer explains that a truck has overturned ahead and the highway is temporarily closed. When Jill asks how long the delay will last, he estimates at least an hour. He then suggests taking an alternate Route 7. But when Jill learns that the detour adds nearly 50 miles to their trip, everyone's excitement starts to fade. With no better option available, they decide to stop at an old gas station nearby. Jill and Allison head toward the restroom while the others stay behind. On the way, the two girls talk about Bree. Allison hesitantly admits that she doesn't really like having Bree around. Moments later, Allison enters the restroom while Jill waits outside. An unsettling silence hangs over the entire place. As Jill looks around, her attention is drawn to a pickup truck parked near the edge of the gas station. She thinks she sees something moving behind it. Curious, she slowly walks closer, and then freezes. Lying behind the truck is the massive corpse of a bear. Meanwhile, inside the store, Maddie and Bree are having a conversation. Bree quietly confesses that she feels Maddie's friends don't like her. Maddie reassures her, saying that's not true. They just haven't gotten to know her yet. At that moment, Bree notices an old tourist guidebook sitting on the counter. Flipping through its pages, she discovers that the area was once infamous for brutal witch trials centuries ago. The strange piece of history makes both of them laugh, and as a joke, they decide to take the guidebook with them. But as they leave the store, they notice a local man standing nearby, silently staring at them. Back in the restroom, Allison is completely alone. Just as she's about to leave, the lights suddenly begin to flicker. Then, without warning, the restroom door slams shut on its own. Startled, Allison steps back in fear. A moment later, she glances toward the mirror and her blood runs cold. Reflected behind her is a strange, shadowy figure. Its face appears split into three separate faces, twisted together into one horrifying form. Allison's heart begins pounding in her chest. Panicking, she rushes to the door and desperately tries to open it. She screams for Jill, calling her name over and over again. But from outside, there is only silence. Outside, Jill was still staring at the dead bear lying near the lake when the owner of the vehicle suddenly showed up. Shocked, Jill asked, "What is this?" The man casually replied, "I set a spring trap out in the woods." Jill immediately fired back, saying that spring traps were illegal. Speaking in a low, cold voice, the man responded, "Those rules don't apply here." Hearing that made Jill furious. Just then, her boyfriend arrived and tried to calm her down. But before anyone could say another word, Allison's terrified screams echoed from the bathroom area. The two of them rushed over and threw open the door, pulling Allison outside. Jill grabbed her and apologized, clearly shaken. At that moment, the atmosphere turned heavy and unsettling. Everyone agreed that it was best to leave as quickly as possible and head back to the car. Once they reached the vehicle, Maddie asked, "So, what's the plan now?" Todd answered, "I know a shortcut." As the group prepared to leave, they noticed that same hunter-like man standing in the distance, silently watching them once again. While driving, Philip sent Jill a text message. "When are we going to tell Derek?" Jill glanced at the screen but chose not to respond. A little later, Maddie and Bree spotted the same old witch trial sign standing beside the road. Trying to lighten the mood, Bree began telling the group the story behind it. She explained that many years ago, several poor women in the area suddenly became mysteriously ill. The village priest came to investigate, but even he couldn't figure out what was causing the sickness. Desperate to protect his reputation, he accused the women of being witches. The villagers believed him without question. Consumed by fear and superstition, they brutally executed the innocent women. Most of the group paid little attention to Bree's story, and before long they arrived at a deserted road marked with a large sign that read, "No passing." Everyone turned to Todd and asked, "Is this really the way?" Todd nodded confidently. "Yeah, there's a service road a little farther ahead. After that, the mountain route will take us straight to our destination." With no better option, the group decided to keep moving forward. Derek broke the chain blocking the path, and they continued down the isolated road. Meanwhile, somewhere else, that mysterious hunter was on the move. A warning came over his radio, announcing that a powerful snowstorm was approaching. But he didn't seem concerned at all. He switched off the radio, picked up his rifle, and silently disappeared into the dark forest. The group had been driving for hours, but they still hadn't reached their destination. Meanwhile, Allison couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the restroom. Her heart was still racing with fear. Suddenly, she noticed a crow perched on a tree branch. For a moment, it seemed as if the bird was trying to speak to her. Confused, Allison turned to Bree and asked what the crow was saying. Bree looked at her strangely and replied that the crow hadn't said anything at all. Just then, Jill asked Allison if she was okay. Trying not to worry anyone, Allison forced a smile and said she was fine. A little later, Jill woke up from a nap and realized that the others were arguing with Todd. They had been traveling for hours, yet somehow they seemed to be stuck on the same road. Todd insisted that everyone should just trust him, but Derek had finally lost his patience. Frustrated, he told everyone to check the map on their phones. The problem was that none of them had any signal. As Derek looked around in disbelief, his attention drifted away from the road for just a second. That was all it took. The car suddenly skidded across the icy surface and slammed to a stop. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. However, the vehicle was now hopelessly stuck in the snow. Derek immediately exploded in anger and started yelling at Todd. Maddie tried to calm him down, but Derek wasn't interested in listening. Everyone climbed out of the car and discovered that one of the tires was buried deep in the snow. Seeing no other option, Todd decided to pull out the spare tire and figure out a way to get the vehicle moving again. Back inside the car, Allison sat frozen in her seat, staring into the dark forest beyond the road. Without taking her eyes off the trees, she quietly whispered, "We're never getting out of here." Concerned, Bree asked her what she meant, but Allison didn't answer. Outside, Derek ordered everyone to help push the car. The group worked together, struggling against the snow, trying desperately to free the vehicle. But Allison barely noticed. Terrified, she kept staring into the forest as if something hidden among the trees was watching her. Jill noticed Allison's uneasy behavior and asked if she wanted company for a bathroom break. Allison quickly shook her head and refused, so Jill headed into the woods alone. As she ventured deeper between the trees, strange sounds began echoing through the forest. The noises seemed to call out to her, guiding her farther and farther into the darkness. Eventually, they led her to a bizarre-looking tree unlike anything she had ever seen before. Standing before it, Jill couldn't look away. For some reason, she found herself staring at the tree with an unsettling fascination, as though it was silently calling her closer. But then, out of nowhere, Philip shows up. The moment Jill sees him, she freezes in fear. Before either of them can say anything, someone calls Jill's name, and she quickly heads back to the car, leaving Philip behind. As Philip stands there alone, he begins hearing strange noises coming from deep within the trees. The sounds are unsettling, as if something is moving through the forest, watching from the shadows. When Jill returns to the car, she immediately notices that Allison is gone. Confused, she asks the others if they've seen her, but nobody knows where she went. Panic starts to set in. Jill begins shouting Allison's name, her voice echoing through the snowy woods. The entire group spreads out and starts searching the forest. After a while, they finally find Allison. She's kneeling beside the carcass of a dead deer. The animal's body has been brutally torn apart, its flesh shredded in a way that doesn't look natural. Everyone is horrified by the sight. Jill carefully approaches her and asks, "Allison, are you okay?" But Allison doesn't respond. She simply stares at the mutilated deer. A few seconds later, she suddenly vomits. Shaken by what they've seen, The group returns to the car and decides to push it out of the snow. Derek tells Allison to get behind the wheel while everyone else pushes. This time, the vehicle finally breaks free. But just as Derek bends down to tie his shoelace, something shocking happens. Without warning, Allison slams on the accelerator and drives straight toward him. At the last second, Derek jumps out of the way, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Furious, he yanks Allison out of the car and tries to attack her, but the others rush in and stop him before things get out of control. Jill immediately says they need to leave this place as soon as possible. However, Philip notices something terrible. The car has become stuck in the snow again. To make matters worse, the sun is already beginning to set and the temperature is dropping rapidly. Realizing how serious the situation is, Derek tells everyone to check their phones for a signal. One by one, they look, but nobody has any service. Then Derek remembers that Jill briefly had a signal earlier. He asks for her phone, and she tosses it to him. As he checks it, he notices a message from Philip. Suspicion immediately fills his mind. Determined to find a signal, Derek decides to head deeper into the area and tells Philip to come with him. Philip hesitates at first, but eventually follows. After walking a short distance, Derek suddenly stops. The silence between them becomes heavy. Then he pulls out Jill's phone, shows Philip the message, and starts questioning him about his relationship with Jill. Philip says nothing. The tension between the two men becomes unbearable, and eventually they return to the car without another word. Back at the vehicle, everyone waits for help to arrive. But deep down, they all know the truth. No one is coming to rescue them out here. Realizing this, the group decides that someone will have to leave and find help on foot. Taking responsibility for their situation, Todd volunteers. "I'll go," he says. "This is my fault. I got us stuck here, so I'll bring back help." Still, the thought of walking into that forest alone terrifies him. Seeing this, his brother Maddie offers to go with him. But Bree refuses to let Maddie leave. That's when Allison steps forward and volunteers to accompany Todd instead. Jill tries to stop her, but Allison has already made up her mind. After saying goodbye to their friends, Todd and Allison disappear into the dark, dangerous forest in search of help. Soon, the night falls completely. Inside the stranded car, the cold becomes unbearable. Everyone's hands and feet begin to go numb. Then, a strange sound comes from outside, a slow, scraping noise, as if something is dragging itself across the snow. Jill nervously says that it's probably just an animal. But before she can even finish her sentence, something suddenly slams into the car with tremendous force. Moments later, the sound of heavy footsteps begins echoing through the snow, as if something massive is getting closer and closer. Terrified, everyone immediately locks the doors. Then, another violent impact shakes the car. Derek has had enough and is about to step outside, but Jill quickly grabs his arm and stops him. At that moment, Derek gets an idea. He switches on the car's headlights. The powerful beams cut through the darkness, revealing the scene ahead. What they see leaves everyone stunned. It isn't some unknown monster or mysterious threat. It's Allison. Without wasting a second, they rush outside and carefully bring her back into the car. Her body is covered in blood, but strangely, there doesn't appear to be a single serious wound on her. With a trembling voice, Bree whispers, "I don't think this blood is hers. I think it belongs to someone else." The moment Maddie hears that, his heart starts pounding. The only thing on his mind is his brother, Todd. Just then, Maddie notices something disturbing in Allison's hand, a clump of tangled hair. Fearing the worst, he immediately wants to go out and search for Todd. But before he can leave, Allison's body suddenly begins convulsing violently. Panicking, Bree opens Allison's bag and finds her epilepsy medication. She quickly tries to put a pill into Allison's mouth, but Allison suddenly bites down hard on her fingers. Bree lets out a painful scream and struggles to pull her hand free. As she stumbles backward, her head crashes into a sharp piece of metal inside the car. The impact leaves a deep wound, and blood immediately begins pouring from her head. Overwhelmed by fear and agony, Bree starts thrashing uncontrollably, making the injury even worse. Within moments, blood begins spreading across the floor of the vehicle. Philip turns to Maddie and shouts, "Help her! Hurry!" But by then, it is already too late. Bree's body goes limp, and she collapses unconscious. Seeing the horrifying situation unfold, Derek loses his temper and blames everything on Allison. At that exact moment, Maddie remembers the terrifying story he had read in the guidebook. Panic fills his face as he blurts out, "This place is cursed." Without another word, he throws open the car door and rushes out into the snowy darkness to search for Todd. Jill quickly follows him, desperately trying to stop him. But Maddie is too focused on finding his brother to listen to. Ignoring everything happening behind him, he disappears into the storm. Defeated, Jill returns to the car and immediately asks Philip about Bree's condition. After examining her, Philip says, "The bleeding has mostly stopped. For now, she doesn't seem to be in immediate danger." Jill lets out a deep breath of relief before saying, "We need to get out of here right now." But Derek shakes his head and coldly replies, "I'm not taking that crazy woman Allison with us." Jill responds firmly, "We can't just leave her here alone." Philip nods in agreement and sides with Derek, saying that something is seriously wrong with Allison. Jill insists that Allison is just sick, but the argument between the three quickly escalates. In the end, they reach a difficult decision. Leaving Allison alone would be too dangerous. To prevent anything worse from happening, they decide to tie her hands. Meanwhile, deep in the dense forest, Maddie is desperately searching for his brother, Todd. Suddenly, he notices streaks of blood across the snow. Following the trail, he calls out his brother's name at the top of his lungs. But then, his flashlight begins to flicker. As he cautiously steps back, a horrifying sight catches his eye. A crow hanging upside down from a tree branch. Terrified, Maddie stumbles backward. At that exact moment, his foot accidentally snaps into a bear trap hidden beneath the snow. Back at the car, Derek ties Allison's hands. Even in her unconscious state, she begins mumbling strange words. "I've seen him." A little later, Philip steps outside for a moment. Seizing the opportunity, Derek quietly turns to Jill and says, "I know about your secret relationship with Philip." He then starts planting doubts in her mind. "Don't trust him. I've seen him with other girls more than once." When Philip returns, Jill's attitude toward him has suddenly changed. The shift is so obvious that Philip is left completely confused. As tension continues to build, the car starts running low on fuel, causing the heater to shut off. Out in the freezing wilderness, Maddie screams in agony while struggling to free himself from the bear trap. Despite the unbearable pain and growing fear, he grabs a rock and repeatedly slams it against the trap, trying to loosen its grip. After several desperate attempts, he finally manages to escape. But his leg is badly injured. Blood pours from the wound, and the icy wind only makes the pain worse. Back inside the car, everyone begins searching for extra clothes to stay warm. Philip opens a small box and finds several candles inside. Jill tries lighting a match again and again, but each one is immediately blown out. Finally, she manages to light a candle. The tiny flame pushes back some of the darkness inside the car. But at that very moment, a strange guttural growl escapes from Allison. The sound is so unnatural and disturbing that everyone freezes in shock, nervously staring at one another. Meanwhile, Maddie struggles toward the car. Every step sends a wave of agony shooting through his injured leg. Dragging himself through the snow, he keeps moving forward. Then, suddenly, he spots a faint light glowing in the distance. For a brief moment, hope fills his heart. Maybe it's Todd. Gathering every ounce of strength he has left, he makes his way toward it. But when he finally arrives, he discovers that it's only a flashlight lying in the snow, and what he sees just beyond it completely shatters him. Meanwhile, inside the car, the atmosphere becomes even more terrifying. Allison's strange, deep moans refuse to stop. Frustrated and on edge, Derek snaps at Jill. "Do something! This girl is going to drive us all insane." Suddenly, Allison begins muttering in a chilling voice. "I can't save you. None of you are going to make it out alive." Derek's anger boils over and he moves to throw Allison out of the car. But before he can, Jill quickly pulls out a knife and stops him. She then looks at Philip for support. However, Philip hesitates once again. At the last second, he sides with Derek and wrestles the knife out of Jill's hand. Just then, the sound of a ringing phone echoes from deep within the forest. Hearing it, the three of them immediately rush toward the noise. Back at the car, Bree is left completely alone. When she finally regains consciousness, she sees Allison repeatedly smashing her head against the window. Terrified, Bree reaches for a metal rod lying nearby. But the moment she turns around, Allison lunges at her without warning. Bree's blood-curdling scream echoes through the snowy wilderness, and Jill hears it. Jill immediately runs toward the sound, but in her panic, she slips on the ice and crashes to the ground. Philip tries to help her up, but Jill stops him and quickly tells him everything she sees. At the same time, Derek finds Todd's phone in the woods, and the two rush back toward the car. But when they arrive, they discover that the doors are locked from the inside. Realizing they need the keys, Philip heads back into the forest to find Derek, since he's the one carrying them. Meanwhile, Derek tries to use the phone. But suddenly, he hears footsteps approaching from behind. Slowly, he turns around. And there stands Allison. In a cold, haunting voice, she says, "You left me there. You left me to die alone." Derek is instantly terrified. He turns and runs, desperately searching for a place to hide. A few moments later, he senses someone approaching again. This time, he's ready. Gripping a screwdriver tightly in his hand, he waits for the figure to come closer. The moment the person steps into range, Derek attacks. But it isn't Allison. It's Philip. Before Derek realizes his mistake, Philip is struck and killed. Back at the car, Jill smashes a window with a snow shovel and climbs inside. But the sight waiting for her freezes her in place. Bree's lifeless body lies motionless inside the vehicle. The horrifying discovery leaves Jill shaken to her core. Just then, Derek stumbles back to the car. His face is completely pale and he's struggling to catch his breath. "Allison attacked me," he gasps. "This place, it's really cursed." Jill sees the blood and immediately asks, "Where's Philip?" But Derek can barely answer. He keeps muttering to himself, saying, "The screwdriver. I think I dropped it." Terrified, he suddenly blurts out, "She's punishing us." Jill stares at him in shock and asks, "Who?" Trembling uncontrollably, Derek replies, "I was there, but I didn't know this was going to happen." Then, without warning, he starts stripping off his clothes and babbling like a madman. Just then, Allison's voice echoes from outside. Gripping a metal rod tightly, Jill prepares herself. Allison slowly approaches Derek and calmly tells him to come with her. But Derek's behavior becomes even more bizarre. Frightened by what she's seeing, Jill abandons him and runs outside. Now completely alone, Jill ventures deeper into the forest, desperately searching for help. As she makes her way through the woods, she suddenly discovers Philip's lifeless body. The sight is devastating. Tears fill her eyes as she breaks down in grief. Then, somewhere in the distance, she hears a voice. Thinking it might be helpful, Jill runs toward the sound. But as she moves through the darkness, she can hear the footsteps of something terrifying stalking her from behind. And then, out of nowhere, Allison appears right in front of her. Holding a screwdriver, Allison slowly begins walking toward Jill. At that moment, Derek's words start making a horrifying sense. Jill becomes convinced that Allison is responsible for everything that has happened. Acting on instinct, she wrestles the weapon away from Allison and throws her to the ground. But Allison desperately pleaded, "I didn't do anything." Panicked and overwhelmed by fear, Jill makes a terrible decision. She strikes Allison, killing her on the spot. Suddenly, a gunshot echoes through the forest. A nearby hunter fires a warning shot into the air and shouts, "Don't come any closer." The next morning, police officers arrived at the scene. Blood stains the ground, and bodies are scattered everywhere. One officer approaches Jill and asks, "What happened here?" Jill can only repeat one thing over and over. An evil spirit possessed Allison. and it killed everyone. The officer asks why she believes that, but Jill remains silent. There is something unsettling in her eyes now, a strange, unnatural gleam, as if the very force she blamed for the murders had chosen a new host. And with that chilling realization, the story comes to a terrifying end.